What's happening, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Athletes to Athletes podcast. With being in the heart of March Madness, it's only right we bring on former collegiate basketball player Malcolm Lemmons. Malcolm talks about growing up in the DC area where he was surrounded by high-level players and then making the transition to professional ranks and playing overseas in Japan. We also dig into his entrepreneurial side to discuss his business ventures, which include his newsletter, The Hype Report. So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and as always, thank you for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. So today we are back and sitting down with Malcolm Lemmons. Malcolm, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a little bit since we caught up, so good to have you on here. And as I always say, I love to have people on that I know have kind of done the grind. And we were talking before we got on, and you said, you were traveling for a bit, ready to ramp back up to travel, but it's all part of the grind. And, as athletes, we know about that grind. We transfer it from the court or the field straight into, the office and onto the computer and into the workspace. But before we get too deep into today's conversation, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about you.
For sure. Well, first and foremost, man, appreciate the opportunity. It's great to, connect with you and chop it up. I like to keep it simple, man. I'm a kid from DC. Had this dream my entire life of becoming a professional athlete, and that's what I chased throughout high school. And had the opportunity to play at a really highly competitive high school in the DC area, played against a lot of guys who are current pros. Then had an opportunity to go play Division I at Niagara University. So I went there for 3 years. A lot of ups and downs. Ended up transferring my senior year to a school out in California called Cal State San Marcos, and finished up out there. Then had the opportunity to kind of reach that dream of becoming a professional athlete and playing overseas. So I did that for a couple of years. In Japan, transitioned out of the game around like 2017. Wanted to put basketball behind me and kind of get into the world of business. So that's what I did, man. I've worked in technology. I've started a number of different companies, which I'm sure we'll dive into, and published books and did the whole gamut. And currently right now building a media platform called The Hype Report. And essentially it's just a newsletter that's centered around sports and Web3. So really helping people understand where the future of sports is going as it pertains to technology and blockchain. And really just super passionate about, not only helping athletes, but, the sports business world as a whole. So excited to dive into the conversation, man.
Yeah, for sure. So, you kind of took my first question away from you. How big of a deal has sports been to you, and was becoming a professional athlete always that goal?
100%, man. Sports has been my entire life. And I think initially it was something that my mother put my brother and I to keep us away from negative things that, can surround you when you're growing up in the inner city.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of fell in love with basketball, I think mainly because it was one of those things it was one of those sports you could just play by yourself. All you needed was a ball on the court, and you go out there and just kind of get lost and shoot for hours. And so I would do that, to kind of escape other things that I was going through in my childhood. But as I started to compete more and play against better levels of talent, I just started to develop this drive, this passion for the sport that just continued to manifest as I got older. And so playing against guys like Victor Oladipo and working out with like Kevin Durant and Michael Beasley and some of the great talent that comes out of DC area, man, that just fueled my drive and my kind of love for the game. And I've learned so much from basketball. It's given me so many opportunities, how allowed me to build so many relationships. So forever in debt to the sport, man, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So before you fell in love with basketball, were there any other sports that had your attention?
So basketball was my third sport. Soccer was my first. Football was my second sport. And I really wanted to initially play in the NFL, but my brother played in college, and I saw what football did to his body, and I was like, I don't know about this. So basketball it was, man, but it wasn't my first sport, ironically.
Mm-hmm. So growing up, you mentioned your brother and how your mom put you guys in sports. What was it like growing up with an older sibling, you know, or with another sibling that was an athlete. You know, from my own experience, my closest brother to me is 8.5 years. So he's 16, I'm 8. So we're not doing much on a level playing field at that point, right? So that sibling rivalry is big. He's beating me at Nintendo. He's beating me out in basketball. Anything, you know, you name it, he's beating me. What was it like for you guys growing up? Was there a big sibling rivalry, or was it more so he was teaching you and you were kind of following in his footsteps?
So my brother and I are 4 years, a little over 4 years apart. And so when it was kind of, when we were younger, we were always together. But as he went to high school, we kind of drifted apart a little bit because you got that age difference and that gap. So our relationship wasn't as close as he got older, and it was more focused on like becoming a schoolwork and becoming a better athlete and working on his craft and stuff like that. So the sibling rivalry was there first, but it kind of dropped off, and then we picked it up after we both kind of got older and kind of moved on with our lives, and we're a lot closer now. So.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you picked up a basketball and that light bulb went off that basketball was going to be your sport? I know you kind of touched on seeing your brother play, you know, college football kind of made you want to gravitate more towards basketball because, you know, football is hard on your body, but everyone has that time, that moment, or that game, or, you know, that epiphany out on the court or in practice, or, you know, maybe it's just shoot around where you realize this is the sport for me. When did that happen for you?
So I think I first started playing basketball probably in fifth or sixth grade, and I didn't start taking it seriously until I was going into high school. And it was really I kind of remember this moment because we had a summer camp before my freshman year in high school, and all of the incoming freshmen, all of the returning JV players and the varsity players were all going to the same camp. And I remember getting on the bus with a guy named Tyler Thornton, and Tyler is one of my closest friends. He actually coached at Howard University now. He played at Duke. And so I remember the first moment I met him, and we're getting on the bus to go to the camp, and I'm looking at this dude like he has a mustache. He's like 6'3". I'm like, what grade are you in? He's like, I'm a freshman. And here I am, like 5'10", maybe, scrawny kid. I'm like, this dude's like this out here. And he was like top 100 in our class at the time. So that's when I was like, in my head, I'm like, if I'm going to actually make something with this sport, if I'm going to get somewhere with it, I'm going to have to put in an incredible amount of work, because these dudes are like bigger than me, they're stronger than me, they're more talented. And so I remember that moment being like, all right, well, like, I got to take this to another level. And that was like seeing that level of competition, seeing how guys who were ranked in my class, how good they were at that age. It was like, all right, now it's go time. I got to really, grind at this thing if I'm trying to make it. So I think that was kind of like the epiphany moment for me of like, I want to play this game at a high level, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to catch up to guys like that.
Mm-hmm. So once you kind of flip that switch, right, and you're like, this is what I need to do, and I need to put some things into action in order to make it to where I want to go. When did you start to see your plans come to fruition on the court, and how did the community, meaning coaches and, either on the next level or your own coaches, how did they start to respond to you putting in that work and really committing to your sport?
So I tell people all the time, man, like, I was never the best player on any team past middle school. And I was always maybe like the third, fourth leading scorer. So my skill set as a basketball player, or like my bread and butter, wasn't scoring or being flashy. It was more so I was the guy who was willing to dive on the loose balls, take charges, rebound, do the dirty work. And I found like my niche within that. And so I didn't start to see my game really start to blossom because I played on the freshman team my freshman year, JV my sophomore year. I almost made varsity my sophomore year. We got cut in the last round because our team was incredible that year. We were actually number one in the country in some rankings. And so I didn't really start to see my game develop until going into my junior year. That's when people started to take notice of like, all right, this kid can actually kind of play a little bit. And people started to kind of see that potential take shape a little bit. And that was when I started to get college offers, and I was playing AAU. So it was really my junior year going into high school. And I would say a big reason as to why I started to see that development a lot was working with Kevin Durant's godfather, a guy named Terrence Brown, who, a lot of guys who come out of the PG County area kind of came under his mentorship and trained under him. So I would go out to the rec center where Kevin Durant grew up and work out every single weekend, lifting weights, just like religiously living in that gym, and with a lot of guys who could hoop. And that's when I really started to see my game blossom and those opportunities kind of coming for me.
Yeah. So what kind of, you said your team was incredible, number one ranked on some rankings. What was it like being in that atmosphere, and how much did that push you to go to that next level and hit the weights the way you did?
It was huge, man. I mean, it was more so of like the camaraderie of that team that was more impressive than the individual talent. I mean, you had guys on that team like Cam Johnson, who played football at UVA, then played in the NFL a little bit. Kevin Hogan, who was actually a year below me, but Max Keeney, who played at Harvard. Tyler Thornton, as I mentioned before, he played at Duke. Cedric Lindsey, that played at Richmond. So, I mean, it was probably like 8 to 10 guys who played Division I sports on that one team, and the way that they bonded, the on and off the court, I think was a huge reason as to why they were so good. They really just played well together. So I think from the standpoint of like seeing a winning culture and seeing how a team, what it takes to be a team like that and reach that level was probably the most eye-opening thing to me throughout that. So that was my sophomore year. So like just seeing that had a huge impact on like how I thought about winning, how I thought about just finding your place within a team that is striving for the goal to like be the best or like to win championships or something like that. So it was an incredible year, and I would say even after that, my junior and senior years, we were still top 30 in the country, and it was just a testament to like building that winning culture around the program for years to come.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk recruiting a little bit. You said you finally started to make it on the court as a junior and really start to blossom and come into your own as I guess, kind of a Dennis Rodman type player, right? You're hitting the floor, you're grabbing rebounds. What type of attention do you start to get from schools once you start to really showcase your talent?
Yeah, so I mean, like every preseason and even after school, like we would have pickup games, we would have morning workouts, and we would have high-level college coaches. I mean, like Coach K would come through the gym, Roy Williams at the time, can't remember his name, but the coach from Dadmont, I think I'm thinking about Ohio State. So I remember just seeing these guys walking in and out of the gym, like high-level programs, and, playing with guys who are getting that interest naturally is going to fall down to you if you're performing well. So I started to get some low-level, mid-major opportunities and scholarships my junior year. So I think my first scholarship offer was Navy. And then from there, I had like Boston University, a couple of Ivy League schools, University of Vermont. And so just having this level of interest was, it was great to see like the amount of work that I had been putting in over that period of time started to pay off, and those like people were taking notice. So it was just being around that talent, man. It was incredible to have, those people actually taking notice of the work that you're putting in.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, how did you balance all of this? Obviously, you just mentioned a host of coaches that are big time, right? They're coaching world teams and Olympic teams, and you know what I mean? They're all over the place, not just on the college scene, but even on the professional, where they're some of the most notable coaches in sports, right? How do you balance trying to obviously show out in front of these coaches, but then also balancing the teams that are interested in you, along with just being a teenager, right? In this atmosphere full of all-stars, how do you balance all of these different things?
I think in hindsight, it was just like, it just came with the territory, man. I think being around other athletes who are going through the same experiences as you and seeing, being able to talk to them about the recruiting experience, which can be really stressful for a lot of athletes, because it's obviously like one of the biggest decisions that you're going to make in your life. I think having guys around me who are going through it was extremely helpful. And then just like that, like trying to play at the highest level possible, you're gonna have to deal with different levels of pressure. And so just kind of taking a step back and making sure that you're taking care of your mental health, you're having a good support system, I think was extremely important at the time for me as well. And then being able just to talk to my mother about what I was feeling at the time was paramount. So I think the biggest in any event, like the biggest thing is just having support, having people who are going to guide you through that process and help you kind of figure out what steps to take and how to navigate the whole thing is extremely important for athletes.
So how did you start to whittle down what schools you were truly interested in, from all the ones that were around and the ones that started to send you letters and phone calls and stuff like that?
So I think at the time, it was really about, I think the biggest thing for me was playing early on in my career. I remember I wanted to play as a freshman, whether that was starting or getting significant time off the bench. My number one focus was like, how do I get on the court early and get that experience? So the schools that were showing me the most interest, that's who, whether it was coming from like the coach directly itself or like my high school coach telling me like, well, they're extremely interested in you. They'll give you opportunity to play early on. And then also looking at like the education piece, like the magnitude of like the degree and how important like education was to my mother. Like I was focused on basketball, but of course, like my mom wanted me to get a great education. So whatever school I went to, it kind of had to have the combination of those, both of those things. And at the time, the two biggest schools that were recruiting me were University of Vermont and Robert Morris University. And I remember I was trying to decide between the two. In the morning that I was going to actually pick a school, University of Vermont called me and said another kid had committed and took my scholarship. And I was actually leaning more towards them. So I was like, well, since my number one is now taken away, I'm going to go with Robert Morris University. And so I ended up committing there right before my senior year. And ironically enough, the kid who took my scholarship at the University of Vermont ended up decommitting. And I really, I think in my heart, I wanted to go to University of Vermont, but I was like, I made a decision I was going to stick with it. But I actually ended up decommitting from Robert Morris 2 weeks after I graduated from high school. And that's a story within itself. But I can't remember, what was your original question?
Just how did you finally kind of whittle it down to the school you ended up going to? Yeah.
So it was mainly about those two things, like the education, and then also like, am I going to play? So that was the two things that mattered to me the most at the time.
Yeah. So you end up going to Niagara. How do you finally make it onto that campus after, it not even being in your top two?
Right. So after I graduated high school, I remember being at the gym working out, and there was some rumors that the coaching staff at Robert Morris was exploring other opportunities. They just came off a really good year, and there were some rumors that they were going to leave. And I remember getting a call from the coach at the time, who was Mike Rice, and he was basically left me a voice message because I missed it at the time. He was like, there's news out there. We have no plans of going anywhere, blah, 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 blah. I was like, all right, cool. The following week, I get another call from him, and they basically saying like, well, the opportunity for him to go to Rutgers University came up. He took the job and took the whole coaching staff with him. And that was another reason why I wanted to go to Robert Morris, was that I believed in the coaching staff. And so after that happened, I kind of took a step back and really assessed whether I wanted to play for the new coach that was coming in. And I sat down with him, went to dinner with him and my mom, and ultimately felt like it wasn't the right move for me. So I decommitted and had some opportunities to go to prep school, but my mom would have had to pay, and she didn't have the money at the time. So I'm like, well, I don't have a school to go to. And then I remember maybe about a week after all this happened, Niagara University had a kid who got kicked off the team. And so they had a scholarship open up. Coach came down, met with me, was like, we want to do an official visit this weekend. Flew back up to Niagara Falls, New York. Had never even heard of it. And so I went up there, fell in love with the campus, fell in love with the team, with the city, and committed on the spot. So it was really kind of just happenstance and a series of events that, I really had no control over, but Niagara wasn't even really on the radar until that moment.
So you mentioned it, mom wanted you to get the big education, and that sounds exactly like it was for me and my siblings. I went to college. It was, mom wants to make sure that you get a really good education. My dad obviously wanted me to get a good education, but he also wanted to see me out there playing on Saturdays. Right. So that was one of the things, you had this person talking about this, you have this person talking about this. When you get to campus, do you pick a major? Did you and your mom talk about a major before you got there? Did you know what you wanted to study?
Yeah, it was always business, man. I think from a kid, the only other thing that I ever had an interest in was business,
Hmm.
in some capacity. So even in middle school, like I remember being a kid who was selling candy. I was flipping shoes. I was selling T-shirts. Like I was always trying to get my hands on something to sell. I just had this infatuation with like the process of making money,
Hmm.
and so I knew my major before I even got on campus. Like I knew it was going to be something business related, so it really wasn't a discussion there.
Yeah. So we'll get back to the basketball portion. I want to kind of skip ahead to that business aspect of things. And you mentioned, in the intro that you've created some businesses and right now you're working on a newsletter and things like that. How did these businesses start to come about?
So a lot of it was me kind of following my genuine curiosity about different things. So even when I was playing overseas, like having a lot of time on my hands off the court allowed me to explore different things I was interested in and study different business models and what other people have built and try to figure out, well, is this even a viable opportunity for me or something that I would want to do? So I was always willing to try different things. And if it didn't work, pivot, move on, put it to the side. And so I've done another number of different passion projects, businesses, and a lot of them, have failed. A lot of them didn't work out the way that I wanted them to. But the biggest thing I've taken away is like the skills that I've learned throughout the whole process, of like starting and stopping things, and just enjoying like the journey of creating value for other people and building stuff that I, have a passion for. So it was more so just about exploring and doing things at the time that I felt was right and that I, trusted my intuition.
Hmm. So I know right now you're also contributing writer as well as having your own newsletter. How do you balance being in so many different areas as an entrepreneur, as well as managing, your own aspects of being a contributing writer, as well as having your own newsletter?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough, man. I started working with Boardroom a little over a month ago, and it's been a great relationship already. Being able to kind of collaborate with a platform that aligns on like my values and stuff that I believe in and believing in their vision and things of that nature, but also like building a hype report and my own analysis and research of like where I see sports going as it pertains to Web3. For me, it just goes back to like loving what I'm doing day in and day out, like
Hmm.
having a genuine curiosity in the space, and aligning with people who share in that vision and who believe in what I'm doing, man. It's all about providing something for other people who, see the value in it. And if they're getting something out of it, then that kind of motivates and incentivizes me to continue doing what I'm doing. So just enjoying the process, man, and being grateful for, being able to even have a platform,
Hmm.
such as that in a partnership like this. So just enjoying the daily process and putting in the work. And this is something I see myself doing for a long time, man.
Hmm. So how did you create the hype report? How did that come about?
So I started diving into Web3 at the beginning of the pandemic, and at the time, it was more so me just trying to. I've always had this interest, as I said, like I've worked in technology before, and I always had kind of this curiosity about innovation and how technology can impact so many different industries. So when I heard about Web3, I'm like, well, here you got this new concept of like blockchain technology. What does this really mean?
Hmm.
And I started to dive into like white papers and kind of just being a nerd about it, man. Just like following some of the thought leaders on Twitter, and trying to learn as much as possible. And at the time, I was trying to take a step back from the sports lane a little bit because I felt like it was defining me too much. And I wanted to see if I could build something that was a little bit different. So at the time, I launched, this was probably at the beginning of 2021, I launched a recruiting agency that was focused on helping blockchain and Web3 companies find talent. Because as I was having conversations when I was doing this research, a lot of companies were struggling to find people to hire and also onboarding more people into the space. So I was like, well, here's a problem I can solve, and I can build more relationships and learn more about the space by doing so. Little did I know how challenging B2B sales were, and I burnt out within like 8 months, man. Like it was tough. It was tough with the industry being so new,
Hmm.
and a lot of the funding kind of drying up. And so after that, I was like, okay, well, how can I really merge my experience as an athlete, my interest in sports with technology? And that was something that I never really done before or explored, but I was like, well, blockchain is so new, Web3 is so new. And looking at the underlying characteristics of both industries, I thought there was the perfect marriage when you think about tribalism, community, engagement, all these things that kind of represented both lanes. And so that was really how the Hyperforce started, which it started as a company called The Hype is Real. And it was kind of a play on of like, you have this hyped up industry, but it's some brevity behind it, it's some realness and truth behind it and application. And so I started, man, just putting out a weekly newsletter of like, well, what's going on in the space, even though it's very niche, but I wanted people to understand, well, like, why did the Miami Heat even partner with FTX? Or why did Steph Curry buy a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT? Like, what does all this stuff mean? And it started just as me wanting to learn, but also educating other people. And it's grown, man. The readership has grown. The way that I've covered content has evolved as well in the past 6-7 months, and just continuing to grow it, man, and having fun with the process, as I said before.
Mm-hmm. So getting back a little bit to the athlete part of it, but, you know, I want to bring the business aspect into it as well. You had a chance to go overseas and play, I believe you said in Japan, right? So as a professional athlete, you are your own business, and having all the business acumen that you've had with getting your degree and playing in college, and, you know, now you're essentially on your own, right? You don't have the whole surrounding area of people where it's, you know, the athletes that are around you all the time. Now you are your own business in order to get onto the team, and that's how you get your new community. How was it for you making that transition from college to being a professional, and where did all of that come from, right? How did you make your way overseas to play basketball?
So my senior year playing out in California, Cal State San Marcos, we were at the time an NAIA school, but now it's Division II. But it was a very young program. It had only been 3 years that the program had been in existence. And a lot of the players that I played with were Division I bounce backs. So guys who, for one reason or another, played at Division I school, it didn't work out. This was like their last opportunity. And so I got recruited to come play for a coach named Jim Sire through one of my previous teammates. And, you know, it was an incredible opportunity, man. We finished 32-2. We played against like UCLA, played against San Diego State. So we played against high level talent, made it to the Elite Eight of the NAIA championship. And so like that whole experience and being with that team, a lot of us were able to get recruited by like agents and have interest by agents, but also like scouts from overseas. And so we would have like different people come through the practice and kind of watch us. And that's how like I initially started to get interest from different teams overseas. There was a coach who came to watch one of our practices, and he basically said like, well, I told my coach, I love the way Malcolm plays. I have this opportunity to play in Japan for him if he's open to it. And from there, it was just like I finished school. I went home for the summer, kept working out, and in August I was gone. I was, you know, headed to Japan. And so that's how the process was for me. And it really was like, there's really no blueprint for how to get overseas. You know what I'm saying? Like it happens in a lot of different ways for different guys. Typically the process starts where like you find an agent through someone you know or your coach, and your agent starts to facilitate you know, those conversations or those introductions with teams overseas based off of their connections. Or you can go to a camp in like Vegas where they have like a lot of the showcases and stuff like that, and find an agent or find a coach or a scout overseas. So there's no one way to kind of get over there. But for me, it kind of happened just through my coach knowing another coach over there and him taking me with him. And then, you know, like the years following after that, like I started to kind of figure out the space a little bit on my own, which was like I was starting to hire my own agents. I was firing agents. I was sending out my own highlight tape. So a lot of it was just, man, like trial and error, trying to figure things out, trying to get any contract that I could, because it's highly competitive, man, and everybody wants to play. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game.
Yeah. Dig into that business aspect of being a professional athlete. What, you know, you said you're hiring agents, you're firing agents, and, you know, you're looking at different contracts and trying to make moves. How much did you use, you know, that knowledge of business from, you know, when you were flipping sneakers and selling t-shirts, and now, you know, you're your own entity, right? How much of that knowledge did you use on a business aspect of it once you were a professional athlete in Japan?
That's a good question, man. I think in hindsight, I don't even know how much of that stuff applied when you start to get into like overseas laws and every country being different.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of teams kind of they try to skate around the rules a little bit. I would say a lot of teams, but you're going to get into. I know a lot of players who have been in situations where the team did something they weren't supposed to do, or they owed them money and they weren't trying to pay. And so it's a little bit trickier overseas when it comes to the legality and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I just had this drive and this willingness to do whatever I could to get a job. And so I remember initially after my first year playing, I actually came home a little bit early and I was going to actually go play in the G League. So I worked out for the Lakers G League team and a couple others, and it didn't materialize like the way I wanted it to. And so I came back home and I had to work. I had to get a job. I actually got two jobs. So I was working two jobs, paying for training, paying for gym time, like all that stuff. And at the time, I didn't have an agent. So I would email agents. I found a list of like hundreds of agents. I would email them. I was emailing scouts. I was emailing coaches. I was emailing GMs, like hundreds of emails a day. My highlight tape, my stats in college, everything, my bio. I put all that stuff together and I was just shipping it, man, and trying to get any type of interest. And so I ended up staying home for about 6 months, and then I got another opportunity to go back in Japan. But as I said before, it was just about like putting myself out there and trying to see what sticks, trying to build relationships, trying to, do whatever is possible just to get back overseas. And I think now it's a little bit easier because there's probably more information out there for athletes. But at the time, it was like, man, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but as long as I get somebody to respond or some type of interest, then I feel like I'm on the right track.
Yeah. So how did you finally come to the conclusion that it was time to move on from basketball, and how hard was that transition to make?
I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that that day would come. But I think when you spend 20 plus years of your life doing one thing, naturally your identity is so tied to that. So it was difficult, even though I unlike most athletes, I think I had that realization a lot earlier than others do. And so going into my third year playing, I had an opportunity to go play in Morocco. And this was right around Christmas time. And so I remember having my bags packed, contract signed, everything. 2 days before my flight, and I think it was Christmas Eve or maybe the day before Christmas Eve was when my flight was supposed to leave. Like 2 days before that, the team sends me, and the agent I was working with at the time, it sends us an email saying like something like we don't want Malcolm to come, or something like we decided to go with another player, and basically just voided my contract, canceled my flight, like everything. And I'm just like, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
And I remember like Christmas Eve, I was like, I think I'm done playing basketball. I think I was more so tired of the volatility, like the unstable lifestyle, the back and forth, the people trying to screw you over, the going through different agents. And coming from a smaller school, it was a lot more challenging for me to get my foot in the door. So I was just tired of it, man, like the business side of it all and trying to do everything on my own. And I was like, well, I probably can be making more money doing something else. And that's when I knew it. I at the time, I was like, it's time to move on and do something else. So that's what I did, man. It was really just like trusting my heart, trusting that I had given basketball my own and my all, and that it was just time to move on.
Yeah. So this is the part where we get to call 5 questions, and my first question for you is, what's a favorite game that you played in? Maybe it was in college, maybe it was overseas, maybe it was in high school, but what's a game that like really sticks with you?
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is playing against DeMatha. Maybe it was my junior or senior year at American University. And that team had like Quinn Cook, Victor Oladipo, Jeremy Grant. Like the team was stacked, like 4 or 5 pros. And we beat them. And I scored like the last like 4 or 6 points, and finished with like 23. And our fans rushed the court. Like it was an amazing atmosphere, amazing game. We had a lot of battles with them. And so that game really sticks out of my head. And then also my second year as a pro, the first game playing, coming back, because I came in the middle of the season, like probably a month or two into the season. And that first game being back on the court after the year that I went through my rookie year as a pro, it was like, man, like it felt so real. And it was like a sigh of relief after like struggling, working those two jobs and doing all that work to get back overseas. So that game also sticks out in my mind a lot.
Mm-hmm. What would you say was a player or a coach that you looked up to as a youngster?
Player was probably, I probably to say Chris Wright, who played at Georgetown. He played in the NBA a little bit, but he's still playing overseas, I think in Italy now. But he's probably one of the best, if not the best, high school players I've ever seen in my life, man. Like he's incredibly talented, and then also just a great person, man. Like I've worked out with him several times. His family's close to mine, and just watching his trajectory. He also has an MS, and so like him being the first player to play in the NBA with MS, and like just being an inspiration for people, and just what he's been able to do using the game of basketball to impact others is amazing. So like watching him from high school, he definitely sticks out in my mind. And then as far as coaches, I mean, I would definitely say like Taris Brown, who's Kevin Durant's godfather. Like his mentorship has been incredible ever since I was in high school. And then also a guy named Bob Wagner, who coached at my high school, and he also coached Lynn Bias back in the day. So I've been fortunate, man, to have a lot of people who, have been a great inspiration to me, and who have a lot of experience and wealth of knowledge within the game of basketball, and have impacted a lot of kids' lives, man.
Mm-hmm. What's something you'll always remember about playing overseas? Maybe it was that first game and you realized the difference of the game, but what's something that you can kind of explain is a nugget that you'll remember about playing overseas?
The language barrier sticks out of my mind a lot, man. Like that shit was tough. Especially that second year, the team I played on had maybe about 6 or 7 rookies, and they were all Japanese. So they were young kids, maybe like 18, 19, and they couldn't speak a lick of English, man. And so trying to communicate with them and get them to understand, like, this is what I'm trying to do, or this is the play, like, it was challenging, but it was also like a great learning experience, man. And I think just being in a new culture and being open to how other people live, that was beautiful, man. And I love Japan. I tell people all the time, like, I would go back to live in Tokyo. I loved it. So just that being in a place that was vastly different than what I experienced my entire life, and being able to meet new people and experience a totally different world was amazing, man, to say the least.
As from a business standpoint, what's something that you've learned as an entrepreneur and somebody creating their own from the ground up that has continued to kind of stick with you as you've created more and kind of dove more into the business industry?
So many things come to mind. I think one of the biggest things is probably nothing happens overnight. And it's kind of cliche, but it's very true, especially in business. And I think a lot of people give up before they start to see things happen for them. And so having that like consistent focus day in, day out, of like, one, enjoying the stuff that you're building, but also 2, servicing other people, I think is extremely important to keeping that momentum going for a long period of time. Because, there's businesses that sometimes it happens for people in like 3 years, but, they've been really laying the groundwork for years and you just haven't seen it. Or, sometimes it's just like it takes 10 plus years of just grinding it out, not seeing much growth, but then you hit that 10th year and it's like, okay, it's happening. But it's just like having that long-term focus and diligence to continue pushing forward and continue with the process is probably the biggest thing that I've taken away. Is like, just keep going, man. Don't quit before it starts happening.
Yeah. So throughout your entire career as an athlete, as a businessman, what's a piece of advice that next generation should know about? Maybe it's something a coach told you, or a teammate, or, something that you learned throughout your career, but what's a piece of advice that people should definitely know?
I think specifically when it comes to athletes, especially in the NIL era, as we live in a world that's more digitally connected, I would say that, and this applies on the playing field, and I guess more so off of it, but on as well, is like your reputation is everything. So being a good person, being kind to people, doing the right thing matters a lot in this day and age, and don't do anything to jeopardize, the opportunities that you can have in your future by doing something stupid. And so like just being aware, like having the self-awareness to know wrong from right, and being a good person, I think is extremely underrated in this day and age, and don't tarnish your reputation for money or anything else. And so that's probably, there's a lot of things, a lot of pieces of advice, but that's one thing that I think that comes to mind off the top, is just like your reputation matters, and it take one instance, one situation to destroy it.
Yeah. Well, Malcolm, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking some time out. Before I let you go, do you have anything else for us? Do you want to let us know kind of how we can get to the Hype Report, where we can find you on social media, anything else like that?
No, for sure, man. I appreciate this. I'm on every social media platform, probably most active on Twitter and LinkedIn at Malcolm Lemmons, and that's across the board. And then the Hype Report is www.thehypereport.xyz. You can sign up, and always appreciate any feedback, and definitely people to subscribe and share. So
I appreciate it, Malcolm. This has been great. Good luck. I'm definitely going to be checking out the Hype Report even more. Started reading it today to prepare a little bit for our chat, but I'm definitely going to be subscribing to it and getting in on the fun and some of the things that you're putting out there. But I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, and look forward to hearing a little bit more from you in the future too.
My man, appreciate the opportunity, brother.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Athletes to Athletes podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. To engage with everything the A2A platform has to offer, go to the App Store and search Athletes to Athletes to download our new app. You can check out our educational material, and you'll ensure that you don't miss when a new episode of the A2A podcast drops. Again, thank you for listening. We'll see you again next time.